Thank you all for getting a laugh at the classic Saturday Night Live there. I always think of that bag of glass skit when I think about computer security, because it seems like so often security is an afterthought when it comes to IT products. And it's something that is left up to the user to implement. And often they're missing features or missing guidance on how to really make your environment secure. So today we actually have somebody who is training to be a certified ethical hacker on the line. His name is Nathan Redmond. Thanks for joining us today, Nathan. Tell me a little bit about your background in IT.
So I've been working in IT for a good, I'd say 14, 15 years at this point, kind of starting with basic general user support, troubleshooting issues, and have slowly just kind of built my way more into a network engineering role, where I'm a little bit more currently looking into a cybersecurity role where it's more specifically focused on vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, and really exercising the strength of people's networks when it comes to their level of security.
So tell us a little bit more about how you can exploit a system and get into it and take control of it.
Sure. So one of the things I've noticed hacking 101, the basics, the 5 steps when it comes down to it is reconnaissance, scanning, gaining access, maintaining access, and covering your tracks. Reconnaissance is really just kind of getting obvious recon information on your target, having a purpose as to what exactly you're trying to achieve, what you're wanting to gain from it. Once you have that information, just utilizing it to scan networks. For example, you may want to attack your target's website to see if it's tied physically to the business, if they're hosting it within house or if it's hosted elsewhere. If it's in-house, well, then your attacker may be able to gain a little bit more resources. After scanning and seeing if there's any vulnerabilities that can be exploited, that's where the next step is gaining that access, using that exploit to actually enter into the business, try to, like I said, just gain access and be able to see what else can be found, maintaining your access. Once you get into the system, obviously you want to make sure that you stay in that system and you're able to continue to go through, see if there's any exploitable resources, and in the end, covering your tracks. So that way your hacker, if done successfully, that they leave no trace, so there's no finding them. They stole what they needed, and there's no way of pointing it back to them, that they were the ones that exploited you. When it comes down to it, when it comes to hacking is not as difficult as it really seems, especially because a lot of the tools are very much open source. For example, as you can see on the second bullet point, Kali Linux as well as Black Arch Linux. Both of them are very free tools that you can download right now. You can just Google it, download it, throw it to a flash drive, and you immediately have the tools. Now, the purpose of them being open source isn't to, promote unethical hacking, but more of to have those tools readily available for those who are genuine and, have ethical standards, are able to use those tools to utilize them to say, hey, some of the things that you're doing when it comes to your security aren't as secure because right here, open source, we have evidence of how easily it is to exploit you. So those tools they're open source, they're free, they're great for training, but at the same time, they still can be used maliciously.
So I guess, in IT, there's the concept around a red team and a blue team. Can you talk to those concepts a little bit?
So red team is going to be more of the offense. So the red team is going to be the group of folks who are in fact actively trying to attack someone. Well, I say attack, but not like maliciously, but in a way of trying to gain control, using some of the easiest and most forgotten methods possible. So some of that would be default passwords and configurations. Pretty much every piece of equipment, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's your computer or if it's a firewall, network switch, they're going to come with a default password and a very default configuration.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's so you can immediately get the device set up. But for those folks who leave that default configuration, anybody can Google what's the default config of this HP 1910 switch, and it gives you an IP address, it gives you a password. And if you left that as default, well, the hacker has that public information and can easily get into it. Using other things such as like outdated and unpatched systems, or equipment that used to be in production or is still in production but not actually used, just completely forgotten. Those can be exploited if they're not maintained properly. If they're forgotten and there's no upgrades, there could be exploits and vulnerabilities that come out over time, and forgotten tools can be used against you.
I see. So, kind of going back to the bag of glass skit, I've seen that some of the manufacturers have started putting a password generator on their products, so they don't just have one default password for everything. Each product is given a different default password, but those types of things aren't really mainstream yet. We all have hundreds of devices in our networks, and a lot of them are going to just have a standard password.
Correct.
So the blue team, what's its role?
So blue team is going to be more of the defense. They are the folks who are actively preventing these type of attacks and things from coming in. So blue team is going to be more of, as a defense, they're going to make sure that your configuration is not default. It's set up and configured in a way that is benefiting the business, but not exploitable. It's not vulnerable to attacks, as well as just managing and maintaining. And overall, blue team is the prevention team.
Okay. So I guess these could be different departments in a big company, or maybe sort of a breakout team.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I guess things like the Kali Linux and the Black Arch. What would some of the features be that they would have that the red team would be using to sort of check the work of the blue team?
So Kali Linux, for example, has a tool called Nmap, which is a very useful tool when it comes to scanning networks and getting an idea of, what is the firewall managing? What is the firewall allowing through? Your firewall is going to be your first line of defense when it comes to your network in general and security. So with Nmap, you can select a specific target, or you can do a range on the network to scan the entirety of it and see what's talking, see what kind of traffic is available to go through, whether it be web address, secure web address, any remote desktop, any specific applications that are hosting a server. Nmap is really revealing with that. Another tool that Kali has on there is Wireshark, which is kind of a man in the middle. It not just scans your network to see what's open, but it's more of scanning your network as to what's happening right now. Like, for example, if I ran Wireshark on my laptop that I'm using, it would show there is Zoom meeting traffic. It would show that I have Firefox tabs open and I'm looking at web traffic. So that was going to be a little bit more actively what's happening. So it's good for analysis to see if there's any malicious traffic happening. But it can also be used even further, seeing what other network is talking, not just on my device, but on the network that I'm connected to right now.
I see. So I guess, firewall configurations these days, I mean, it used to be that and I mean, it still is to a smaller degree, but it used to be that you could really control what services were working at a firewall level. Now everything pretty much is based on web traffic, and it's almost gotten harder, it feels like, to know what's going on in your network. Are you seeing that as well? And what are some of the risks around everything being on web these days?
So What's nice about the fact of everything being on the web is it at least eliminates a single point of failure, because things that are cloud-based are going to be based on redundant systems that are outside of your physical building. Now, in turn to that, it does obviously make you highly reliant off of having an active internet connection,
Sure.
which isn't always the case, but at the same time, that's where having all of that traffic going through just a web port really kind of narrows it down, and it does turn that into more of a single point of failure.
Yeah. Well, I think you point out here that a lot of times the easiest route in is through social engineering. So, getting the users to install an application or click on something, and that application just goes right out over the web traffic. How do things like Black Arch or Kaylee help really understand, what's going on in that standpoint?
Well, from a social engineering standpoint, it's interesting because it's less technical, because it's not necessarily saying, oh, what level of encryption, what type of math problem algorithm does this security use? But social engineering is, quite frankly, talking to users, whether it be in the form of an email, an urgent message, a voicemail, calling over the phone, trying to represent someone else like some type of form of authority or a familiar figure, and trying to exploit the user. Because as strong as your security may be, at the end of the day, your end users, if they are tricked into revealing information, then it doesn't matter how strong your password security is, that information right there can be used to gain access to a system. So tools in Kali Linux and Black Arch are going to be more of a technical sense. There's a little bit of social engineering in there when it comes to like exploiting someone's Facebook or Twitter or some other social media account to try to pull information, but that's more of a type of reconnaissance type of tool.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell me more about some of the easiest routes that you've gotten into to a system.
Some of the easiest routes are going to be, once you have your target, is actually just kind of scanning it and see if they've left their firewall open. Maybe they have a telnet port or some type of web portal that used to be used and wasn't used anymore. Scanning those type of targets and determining, oh, hey, here's a web server that isn't used anymore, but is still active, hasn't been patched in 5+ years. Let's see if they left a basic password on it, because it's not managed, I'm not paying attention to it anymore. It's not updated because they don't use it anymore. So it's just a forgotten system, but it is still actively connected to both the network within the environment and the internet, so it can be gained access remotely. So that's where it's just an unmanaged target. So scanning that and finding default passwords, gaining access can be as quick as a few seconds with a quick Google search of how do I get into this. It could take a little bit longer. It could take upwards of 10 to 15 minutes. It could be even substantially longer. It could be days. It could be weeks. But time is everything when you're not pressed for time, when you're doing stuff that's technically under the radar.
I see. Well, let's open up the floor here. We've got Max on the call. What questions might you have for somebody who's practiced at hacking into systems, or is that something that you've also been experimenting with?
Thanks, Ian. I had to. Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, hear you great.
Awesome. Sorry, I had to step away. Being on the help desk, random calls come in and got to drop what you're doing. I don't know. I'm just kind of soaking it all in. I mean, I've definitely personally been somewhat interested in cybersecurity, mainly for the, and our door's open. So sacred space has been compromised. Anyway, I have nothing at this time. I'm just going to listen.
Okay. Have you tried the Kali Linux or the Black Arch?
Give me 1 second. Sorry, guys.
Let's talk about knowing your network. Why is it important to really know your network?
So you want to know your network so that way you are basically always on the defense. Because if you're always on the defense, your offense is a lot easier to manage. When you keep an active and updated documentation on everything, all of the systems that you've got running, all of your servers, all of your resources, processes, then you have a better idea of making sure that the active things are active and nothing's forgotten. And it's easiest to do that if you have a rotating schedule to review those processes and equipment to ensure that things aren't forgotten or lost, which could leave you vulnerable to an attack. But at the same time, as long as you are keeping that ball rolling and are actively following, you can easily have both an offense and a defense ready in the event that you are a victim or someone actively tries to attack you or compromise your system. You know, it's going to be a lot harder for them to do so if you have proactively managed everything.
So what are some of the obstacles that you've seen to knowing your network? I mean, there's just users are bringing their own device. There's all these things hopping on the network nowadays, from our thermometer to our laptop, our thermostat to our laptop. What are some of the things that you see as a challenge?
I'm glad that you mentioned the thermostat, because I love the concept of IoT, the Internet of Things, because being able to change your thermostat, whether in a business or at home with the Nest, having Google Home, Amazon Echo. I know I recently purchased a house, and when I went to get a washer and dryer, it was difficult to find one that didn't have Wi-Fi on it.
Really?
Yeah, there was only 1 or 2 models at Best Buy that did not have Wi-Fi. Wow. And the salesman was pitching really hard to me. He's like, "Oh, but if you're at home, if you're at work late and you have a load in the dryer and it times out for an extra hour, but you want it to keep tumbling, you could just pull it up on your phone and you can blah 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 blah." And he's selling it to me. I'm like, "Well, that sounds great, but what security is on that?" And of course, I just got stared at like I had 3 heads, because as cool as these devices are and the convenience is there, but the level of security is not. There's no management or security or thought process behind it. And what that does is that essentially you don't know your network if you don't know what level of security your devices can have. So if you have a smart home with all these devices, you don't know what back doors they could potentially have, as well as what type of pivotal point those devices can be. So when you have users who bring their own device, sure, that looks good from a company aspect on your bottom line, because that's less physical hardware you have to purchase and provide your employers. But at the same time, what level of updates, what type of management, what other things have they used their computer for? What vulnerabilities lie in that technically unmanaged device? That's where you can't really plan to protect yourself unless you have some absolutely very strong rules in your firewall and lock that device down. So in the end, you just have to shift your focus to make sure that that's least amount available when it comes to resources. But in turn, that could potentially hinder productivity, depending on, I got to go back and now I have to enable this, I have to enable that.
Mm-hmm. So I think just for knowing that the device is on your network is the first challenge, right? I mean,
absolutely.
So what are some of the things that we use to kind of know if that thing is there?
So that's where Wireshark can come into play really nicely. Now that is something that you would see in the moment type of tool, because there's hundreds of thousands of network packets traveling across your network at any given moment. There are more proactive tools such as Splunk, which is a machine learning type of tool that you can set up and have configured to basically give you alerts of different specific traffic, different devices, things like that. There are other tools such as the one that we use, AUVIC, which is a simple network management protocol, SNMP, which also can be programmed to provide specific alerts when it comes to is a new device added to the network? Is a device broadcasting this level of traffic? Did this device go offline? There's many different ways of different levels of monitoring. Yep, there's AUVIC on the screen now.
Yeah.
Which is
so I guess this has been really helpful for us to know our networks, and I guess do it in a simpler, more proactive way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Monitor the network traffic. So you get to see a diagram of everything that's out there.
Yeah, AUVIC is nice because once you set up the SNMP on every device in your network, your firewalls, your switches, your servers, your most active production equipment, it will then map everything out to you to show you basically a nice tree diagram to determine what is where. And looks like you found my found my laptop there. Yeah. So you can see that along with 14 other devices that are on that wireless network since I'm connected to the Wi-Fi. Looks like that last one is an interesting one. That's something that we should look at. Thanks for pointing that out.
It's like we've got a client backup system maybe in the shop.
Probably, yeah, being configured.
So basically, you know, for a long time we were, you know, you install an agent or you use Active Directory. You can kind of keep track of all the things that are sort of playing nice with Active Directory, or a desktop, or you know, you can do Spiceworks or something like that and install an agent onto a server or workstation. But the little devices that sort of hop on, you kind of wouldn't know what's going on with them. So I notice here in AUVIC, some of these lines are a little darker than others. What does that mean, and how can that help you understand what's going on?
So the darker the line, the more of a main artery it is between in the overall network infrastructure. So that way, you know, well, this is a core switch and it connects to that core switch. And then the thinner lines are more of smaller, not necessarily clients, but components. That's a good word to use. Smaller network components that are being utilized.
I see. What other things do you find are helpful in a tool like this?
So audit, well, it's funny that you highlight that because I was just about to say the amount of logs that are obtained by this, so they can be reviewed to determine, oh, that Veeam box, is that genuinely something that's ours? Or going back and saying, oh, is there some other device that may have shown up? So the ability of logging to audit and review devices and the activity that they've done, it's really helpful with AUVIC.
Now, I've also heard that you know, patching all of these devices, you were just talking about that, is a challenge. You know, you put the washing machine on the network and you've got to now install the software updates. And with AUVIC, you can configure it to, you know, log into those devices, save the configuration, save the last known good configuration, and then you can use it to push out patches to switches and routers and those types of things, or at least help manage that.
Correct. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Well, this definitely helps you, you know, to your point, you know your network, know the warranty status, you know, get alerts on you know, traffic, broadcast storms, those types of things that take place. That's really good. So what are some of the other challenges you see with knowing your network and, you know, preparing an offensive and defensive plan?
So now I know we're looking at Auvik and mentioning a couple other tools. It's good to have tools to monitor your network, but you really don't want to just rely off of a single tool, especially if it's dedicated to doing one job but has features that can do other jobs. You don't necessarily want to rely on just that, because what if Auvik fails? You've just come up to a single point of failure. Auvik, I've noticed they do have regular maintenance, which is good, because they're updating and maintaining their own system. But at the same time, if you rely only on them and they go down for a 3-hour window, well, there's 3 hours of no management whatsoever on your network, where you don't necessarily know what's going on. So that's where it's good to kind of spread out and kind of pull resources from other tools, so that way you can actively know what's going on your network in the case of one of your tools or services having an outage. So with that, you having multiple tools, that alone, multiple monitoring tools, is a strong form of, that is a good defense. So that way you can actively see what all is going on at all times from multiple sources.
Okay, nice. Well, I just want to thank everybody for joining today, and see if there's any questions that we have for Nathan from a hacking and cybersecurity standpoint. Well, Nathan, thank you so much for putting this together today and giving us a brief run through of some of the exploits and tools around keeping your network secure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, thank you.